All right. Haven't done one of these in a while, so I've kind of forgot how to use this software. Let me just go full screen here real quick, and let's just prefix what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about inflation. We're going to talk about Bank of England. We're going to talk about the fact that there are rumors that tomorrow the Bank of England are not going to reduce the Bank of England base rate, although inflation has hit its target today. So I want to kind of just dissect some of this stuff, talk a little bit about it. I think it's going to be a good topic of conversation. I did a post this morning on Instagram, or this afternoon, I should say, on Instagram, just saying, look, inflation's at 2%. And unsurprisingly, there's a lot of skepticism in the comment section. And that's really what I want to talk about today, because there are different ways in which you can measure inflation, obviously. And they say we hit the 2% target, but other measures around inflation are not at the 2% target. So is this just a ploy to kind of have this rigged so that, there is influence in terms of how perhaps people vote in the coming weeks for the general election? I'm going to leave that to people to interpret. I already did a video yesterday talking about the fact that we are headed for higher taxes despite what they're saying on the election road at the moment. We are heading for higher taxes. We're probably going to borrow more money. And in worst case scenarios, we might have a combination of spending cuts, more borrowing, and higher taxes. It's just going to be an absolute mess. Nothing is going to get fixed overnight. And so, look, really, really interesting. But let's just dive in with, maybe a little bit of history. We know for a fact that we've had the bank rate at 5.25 now since August 2023. So we're 10 months in with the interest rate remaining the same at 5.25%. And currently the Bank of England is coming under fire because, well, they're being accused of holding mortgage holders to ransom, which I kind of get the sentiment, because mortgage holders have probably been the ones who have been most impacted by the base rate going from 0.05 and even less than that to 5.25%. We've seen mortgage prices increase massively, and that's had a knock-on effect not just to homeowners, but also to renters as well. So the fact that we're now at 2%, and it just so happens to be that we're in election cycle, and tomorrow the Bank of England is likely to do nothing, for some people is very, very unpalatable. The only kind of like give back that I would say to that is the fact that, unfortunately, the Bank of England, as an independent body, and I use air quotes there because you have to use air quotes, right? As an independent body, isn't necessarily concerned about individual mortgage holders. They're looking at the wider economic picture, the wider picture when it comes to inflation, the levers and the things that have caused it, and the levers they can pull to bring it back down. But we're at the 2% target right now. So tomorrow, they're not likely to do anything, which I think is a little outrageous. And I just want to show you a bit of an article right here as to why they're not likely to do anything tomorrow in terms of cutting the base rate. And bearing in mind, they've signposted, and things do move. Obviously, they move and they flex. So they've got to do what they got to do. But let's just have a look at this article right here. So it says it, Bank of England set to hold rates to avoid rocking the boat pre-election. So they're already signposting this. And what do you think? Is it a coincidence that today we get news that inflation is at 2%, and then tomorrow, when the Monetary Policy Committee is due to meet, we're already hearing that they're not going to change interest rates. They're going to hold interest rates at 5.25% so as not to rock the boat. Now, I suppose there are two arguments to this. Let me just come full screen really quickly. I suppose there are two arguments to this. If they reduce the bank rate, they could be accused of helping the Tories, perhaps making it more appealing, or making the Tory line of debate and campaign that they've done a good job with inflation and they've made a difference. You could argue that they could be accused of helping and buttressing that argument. On the other side, does it help Labour if they hold rates? Yeah, probably. So is this a case of damned if they do, damned if they don't? I don't know. But this is what we are hearing in the reports right now, that they are unlikely to do anything because they don't want to rock the boat. And when you come all the way down here It says here the bank is abiding by the rules of pre-election campaign periods, meaning its policymakers cannot make any speeches or public statements. Now, I will say I was invited to number 10 at the last inflation breakdown. It feels like it was like a month or so ago now. I think it's about a month ago, just a little over a month ago. And I was invited by the Treasury. So, and that was the day before the general election was actually called. So I got the chance to meet Jeremy Hunt, ask a few questions alongside some other people. And the following day, obviously, the general election got called. Now, I've since had an email from the Treasury to say, look, everything, all of the materials that we filmed that day, I can no longer share. So I think this is a government-wide policy that if you are within government, you can't make any announcements or any speeches, because I'm not even allowed to use the images that we took. I'm not allowed to use them on social media because it could be seen as a way of trying to influence people during the general election. So we know that there is kind of this rule that's in place here. So you could argue that they are abiding by the rules. But I guess the bigger question really becomes, how are we doing when it comes to the inflation picture itself? I do want to talk about this graph right here, because there are three ways in which you can manage inflation, or measure inflation, I should say. So the first one is you use headline inflation, which kind of has a look at all of the things. It will look at food. It will look at everything, basically. It's a very, very high level, and it will be quite volatile because it's a basket of pretty much most things, everything altogether. That's what they're reporting has come in at 2% today. But people, so you're probably thinking, and I've seen it in the comment section this afternoon, well, it doesn't feel like inflation is down at 2%. And I think it's important to remember that because inflation has come in at 2% doesn't mean that prices are going down. It just means prices aren't rising as quickly as they were before. So it doesn't feel like you're better off, because you're not. Prices are still going up, but not at higher levels than the prescribed level of inflation, but prices have increased, and we all have to sit and abide with that now. I think that's the adjustment that we all have to make. So that's what they're measuring. That's what came in today. When you look at things like core inflation, so core inflation will include everything aside from volatile things like energy, for example. It won't include anything like that. It won't include alcohol, tobacco. So that in itself here has come in. I think there's at 3.2% according to this article right here. Let's have a look at this. Actually, let me just find it. I should have highlighted it a little bit more before I started the stream. But like I said, I haven't done one of these in such a long time. I could not remember how to set up the software. Now, what did it come out at? I'm sure it came out at like 3.2 or something like that. Core inflation, 3.5%. It's come out at, okay? 3.5%. Core inflation. Now, service inflation. So service inflation, which is, service delivery costs, 5.5%, according to this right here. So it is, I guess, not unexpected that people feel as though you're fudging these numbers. You're making this up perhaps to ensure that you have the best messaging for the general election. And look, I don't like to be a conspiracy theorist, but it's very, very hard to look at these numbers and to not kind of agree with that sentiment. Say that, well, when you look at things like, headline inflation, which excludes things like food and energy, it's all services. That's one thing to report. But when you look at, other bits and pieces, like, CPI, so headline inflation will include everything. Core inflation will exclude things like food and energy. Then you've got service, which only looks at services alone. So it's impossible to measure everything and to provide a even scale of everything. But for people who are concerned about day-to-day living, most households in the UK are probably going to be concerned more with what core inflation is, to a certain extent, even though it doesn't include food and energy. So it is a bit of a difficult one. And should they simplify how inflation is measured? Perhaps. Maybe they should. But this is where we currently are right now. And so I do have a question for you, because this is the most important thing that I kind of wanted to get to. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think that, this is pretty much all kind of like rigged? Do you think it actually matters? I've been asked to do a segment potentially tomorrow looking at this specifically. I honestly think it doesn't matter whether inflation were to go sub 2%. right? So they could say, "Oh, we've done a great job and we've got everything down." People are still worse off than they were previously 2 years ago. And I think for most people in most households, that's what they care about. Food's more expensive, fuel is more expensive, energy costs are coming down, but they are still elevated compared to where we were in 2020. Still more expensive. Everything has gone up. And in this election cycle so far, there is really no concrete plan around how any of this is going to get fixed. It's just, I don't feel as though we're having the conversations that matter enough for people to make an informed decision on who should be in office next term. And my big fear is this. I think people are hoping that the new government will get in, and it's likely going to be Labour, that there will be a fix within a relatively short period of time. I honestly don't think there will be. I think it will just be more of the same. And I don't think that they're being honest with us about the challenge that we're facing and the things that they have to do. It's going to be an interesting one. It really, really is. And look, all I'm going to say is please vote. However, whichever way you decide to vote, please vote because your voice has to be heard in these kind of circumstances where there's so much uncertainty. Um, I feel like it's political games, really. It's coincidence. Yeah, inflation hits 2% today. I mean, you could argue, did the Tories foresee this? Were they expecting this? And you look, they look at forecasts all the time. So they would have known early on that data would have kind of brought us closer to this inflation line. So it would make sense that they call the election at 2.3, knowing full well once you're in full election campaigning mode, that inflation is going to hit 2%. And I think they have had a serious miscalculation and underestimated the sentiment of the public when it comes to what people think about their performance. And I think Labour have been able to ride off the coattails of that, despite the jibes around tax and what will and won't be increased. It's going to be an interesting one. It really, really is. But overall, I think we're in a bit of a mess right now, dude. Like we're in a mess. We're in a mess, and it's going to be difficult. It's going to be a road full of very, very harsh decisions. And I hope we just get someone in the door that is going to be good. I haven't decided how I'm going to vote just yet. I need to have a look at all of their manifestos. Um, I do like what the Lib Dems have talked about in terms of taxing the wealthiest. I spoke about in the video yesterday. How they're going to do that, I would love to see the plan. But the sentiment, the idea is correct. I think they need to be clearer on the definition of the wealthiest people in the country. What does that mean? Hope they're not looking at the top 1% of earners because those aren't the wealthiest people. They need to be looking at the uber wealthy, 10 million plus. And there is a part of their manifesto which actually specifically speaks about that, which is very similar to what Joe Biden's kind of proposing over in the States right now, which is monumental. We have a very, very tough road ahead of us. So I would love to know what you think in the comment section down below. Let me know, what do you think? Is this rigged? Are we in for a tough ride? Or, you know, are these guys just abiding by the rules and trying to keep a squeaky nose? I mean, it's impossible to interpret, and there are so many of us with different views and different points that we come from. This is an opportunity for discourse and debate. It's an opportunity for discourse and debate that I hope leads to some favorable or at least fruitful outcomes in the way in which we vote or the direction the country decides to take. But there you go. That's where we are at this point in time. My verdict and my guess is Bank of England does nothing tomorrow on the announcement. They hold at 5.25%, and we're going to have to wait until August until we see the first rate cut. That's my verdict. And it's early, but I'm going to call it right here. I could be wrong. They might do something crazy and be like, listen, we're going to reduce it to, I don't know, 5%. But I think that's highly unlikely. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. Cheers.